At 63, Stephanie Newman, the daughter of legendary actor Paul Newman, has finally opened up about growing up in the shadow of her father. For decades, Stephanie kept a low profile, deliberately avoiding the media spotlight that often followed her famous family. But now, after years of silence, she has decided to break her silence. The revelations she shared have shocked fans and insiders alike, offering a rare and intimate glimpse into the life of one of Hollywood's most beloved stars and the woman who was his daughter. It's a story filled with challenges, unexpected insights, and a complex family dynamic. But what she had to say isn't just about Paul Newman's legacy, it's about her own personal journey. Buckle up, because Stephanie's revelations will change everything you thought you knew about the Newman family. Growing up as the youngest daughter of Paul Newman and actress Joanne Woodward, Stephanie's childhood was far from ordinary. From a young age, she was exposed to the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, surrounded by movie stars, directors, and producers. However, despite the star-studded world she inhabited, Stephanie often felt like a person of little significance in the eyes of the public. While Paul and Joanne's celebrity status made them icons in the entertainment world, it also made their children constantly scrutinized. Stephanie, especially, found it difficult to navigate life under the weight of her father's fame. She recalled how her family's privacy was always compromised, and there was little room for her to simply be herself without being defined by her father's legacy. Her father's public persona, that of a charming, virtuous man, was worlds apart from the reality she experienced at home. And while she admired his work, she often found herself in the background, trying to establish her own identity. As Stephanie matured, the pressure to live up to the expectations placed on her because of her famous father grew more intense, leading her to retreat from the public eye for much of her life. Being the daughter of a globally adored Hollywood icon like Paul Newman came with its own set of challenges. Stephanie spoke candidly about the constant comparisons she faced growing up. From a young age, people expected her to be just like her father, whether it was in terms of talent, personality, or accomplishments. But she wasn't Paul Newman. She was Stephanie, a woman with her own dreams, her own identity, and her own struggles. The weight of her father's reputation was heavy on her shoulders. People often expected her to follow in his footsteps or live up to the same high standards of perfection that he set in his public life. But as Stephanie explained, this was an impossible task. Not only did she have to deal with the pressure of being a public figure's child, but she also had to grapple with the fact that she wasn't allowed to experience the normal childhood that most people take for granted. From dealing with unwanted media attention to managing the unrealistic expectations placed on her, Stephanie's experiences were far more difficult than the public could ever understand. But instead of speaking out, she chose silence for many years, thinking it was the only way to protect herself from the constant scrutiny. For decades, Stephanie Newman remained a mystery to the public. Unlike many children of celebrities who embraced the limelight, she preferred to live away from it. Her decision to stay silent wasn't because she didn't want to be heard, it was because she was trying to protect herself. Being raised under the intense scrutiny of her father's fame created a sense of vulnerability in her, and she didn't want her personal life to become fodder for the media. Stephanie admitted that growing up in such a high-profile family made it difficult for her to define who she was outside of her father's shadow. The constant attention on her family created a sense of isolation. Though her father was a beloved figure, Stephanie struggled with the idea of always being seen as Paul Newman's daughter instead of as an individual. Her silence, she explained, was a defense mechanism. By staying out of the public eye, she was able to preserve some level of control over her own life. It wasn't until recently, as she reached the age of 63, that Stephanie felt ready to share her side of the story and speak openly about her experiences growing up in such a famous family. In a series of rare interviews, Stephanie has opened up about her life, complexities of being Paul Newman's daughter. What she shared was both emotional and shocking. She talked about the emotional toll of living in the public's eye, constantly compared to her famous father. But what truly surprised people was her candid reflection on the imperfections within the Newman family. While Paul was often portrayed as a perfect father and husband, Stephanie revealed that their family life wasn't as idyllic as it appeared. She admitted that while her father was loving and supportive, he also had his own struggles, which affected his family dynamic. For years, Paul's public image painted him as a flawless figure, but Stephanie's revelations peeled back the layers, revealing a more complex man. What was perhaps most striking about her statements was her acknowledgement of the pressure that fame had on her family. Growing up with a father who was adored by millions made it difficult for Stephanie to find her own voice. She was always in the shadow of his greatness, which made it hard for her to carve out her own path. Despite being seen as a picture-perfect family, the Newman household had its share of challenges. In her interviews, Stephanie opened up about the ups and downs of family life behind the scenes. Paul Newman, though a committed father, wasn't always emotionally available, and his intense focus on his career and philanthropy left little room for family time. This affected Stephanie's relationship with her father, especially as she grew older. As the youngest of 3 daughters, she often felt overshadowed by her father's legacy and by the success of her siblings. However, despite these challenges, there was always a deep love within the family. Stephanie made it clear that, although their family had its struggles, Paul Newman was still a dedicated and loving father. What Stephanie's revelations made clear was that, while the world saw an idealized version of the Newman family, it was far more complex. In her words, "No family is without its flaws," and she was finally ready to share the real story. Fame has a way of distorting reality, and Stephanie Newman is no stranger to its effects. Growing up in a family where the public's perception of her father was a huge part of her identity made it difficult for her to understand who she was outside of that lens. The pressure to live up to the expectations placed on her because of her father's success affected every aspect of her life. Stephanie described how she struggled with the notion of being seen as nothing more than Paul Newman's daughter. The constant media attention made it nearly impossible for her to develop a sense of individuality. The challenge wasn't just about living up to the public's ideal of perfection, but also about trying to find her own voice while constantly being compared to someone who was larger than life. But as she reflects now, she realizes that fame can be both a gift and a curse. While it opened many doors, it also confined her to a role she never chose. Her journey towards self-discovery involved breaking free from the limitations of that role and learning to stand on her own. Stephanie's journey towards self-discovery is one of resilience and strength. As she reflected on her life in her recent interviews, it became clear that she had spent years struggling to break free from the expectations imposed on her. After years of living in the shadow of her father's fame, Stephanie decided to step into the light and define herself on her own terms. She spoke about how she found peace with her own identity, separate from her father's legacy. Stephanie also shared how she was able to build a career and a life outside of Hollywood's gaze, focusing on her passions and interests. Her personal journey wasn't easy, but it was one of growth, acceptance, and healing. Today, she stands as a woman who has embraced her past while also carving out a new path for herself. Through her openness, Stephanie has shown the world that it's possible to redefine yourself, no matter how famous or infamous your family might be. Despite the complexities of his family life, Paul Newman's legacy endures. Stephanie acknowledges that while her father had his imperfections, his contributions to both Hollywood and philanthropy were undeniable. Through Newman's Own, Paul created a brand that gave back to communities in need, with all profits going to charity. He also became an advocate for social justice and equality, using his platform for good. Stephanie's recent interviews reveal that while her father may have struggled with personal demons, his legacy was built on a foundation of generosity, compassion, and authenticity. For Stephanie, it's not just about being known as Paul Newman's daughter. It's about honoring the good he did and carrying that legacy forward. Her role in keeping his memory alive is something she takes seriously, and she is now embracing the responsibility of continuing his charitable work while also living authentically. Paul Newman was not just a Hollywood star. He was a living legend. Known for his roles in films like Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid and Cool Hand Luke, he captured the hearts of audiences around the world. But his legacy extended far beyond the screen. Newman's involvement in philanthropy, including his creation of the food company Newman's Own, which donated all profits to charity, made him a figure admired for both his talent and his generosity. He was often seen as the epitome of the good guy in Hollywood, charismatic, intelligent, and deeply committed to making a positive impact. Despite all the love and admiration he received, the Newman family remained relatively private, rarely offering glimpses of their personal lives. That's where Stephanie's story comes in. Hidden behind the fame of her father, there were family secrets and stories untold, things that the public never saw or heard. Stephanie's decision to finally speak out about growing up as his daughter provides a new perspective on the man behind the myth. Stephanie Newman's decision to break her silence at 63 has given us a rare and honest glimpse into the life of one of Hollywood's most legendary families. Her revelations are a powerful reminder that even those who seem to have it all face their own struggles. Through her openness, Stephanie has shown us that fame can be both a blessing and a burden, but that finding your own voice is the key to healing. As she continues to embrace her father's legacy while forging her own path, Stephanie's story is one of empowerment and self-discovery. The question now is, what comes next for her? And keeping his memory alive is something she takes seriously, and she is now embracing the responsibility of continuing his charitable work while also living authentically.